when I did the round the world bike ride, is I came up with this philosophy, this idea of trying to get the three F's of endurance, which is the world's first, furthest, and fastest. And thanks for your compliment on me, being able to tell stories and doing things like that. Yes, I do enjoy doing those type of adventures, like climbing Kilimanjaro in a penguin suit or running a marathon in every national park in the UK. But I sort of know I can do those. For the terrier to be scratched, I need to do something really difficult as well. So I do have to do the athletic ones. So like cycling around the world the fastest, first person to swim the length of Britain, first person to do the length of Britain triathlon. At the back of my mind, thinking, right, can I get a record in all three of those categories? So the swim was the first, and then the triathlon around Britain was going to be the furthest, the longest triathlon.
Sean, how are things?
I'm good. I'm here in North Wales, awaiting a snowstorm, apparently.
I believe I'm the same in Scotland, although blue skies now, snowstorm incoming, could be summer tomorrow, knowing how we go at this time of the season. But what's harder to get through? All of the crazy endurance challenges you've done, or maintaining your beard?
Maintaining the beard's easy. Actually, that's the only reason I have a beard, because it's literally zero admin. How many people ask me, oh wow, what beard oils do you use, or what's your group? I'm like, I have dog clippers, which I use to trim it, and I cut my own hair as well. So that happens every now and then. It's probably due a trim at the minute. And that's about it. I don't comb it, as you can tell. Yeah, I'm very lazy. It's half the reason I have a beard, I think.
It's had its practical uses over the year as well, hasn't it? It's a jellyfish swatter.
Jellyfish protection,
it's a warmth
provider, snack hideaways. There's a little walk-in wardrobe in there. Someone put an Argos pencil in my beard once without me knowing.
Well, now you know. An Argos pencil fits in your beard. The age-old question has been answered, but you've got 4 passports, which is fairly unique in this day and age, and you've travelled the world in a way that most people never will get the opportunity to do so. So, which country has stood out to you the most, and why?
Oh man, that's like choosing your favourite child. I like deserts. I love deserts. So, like Peru, going through the Atacama, that was a special place. Namibia, I loved sort of traveling around the deserts of Namibia. And I did that with my mum when I was like 16, like you would think that'd be the worst holiday. My mum's like, I'm going to Namibia, you're coming with? And I was like, oh, mum, but actually it was amazing. And so that's for landscape. I think the people, Tibet, I really sort of just was captivated by the culture in Tibet and the people, and then I guess food. India, I love India. Actually, I think India's the country I've been to the most outside of Europe. So it's hard. I mean, if you ask me this tomorrow, it'll be three other countries. So I love them all really. And everyone. I'm quite naturally inquisitive, so wherever I go, I really want to know everything about everything, really. So, I get a lot from that.
Do you think that comes from growing up in a variety of places, backgrounds, cultures? It's given you a bit of a more refined understanding of the nuance of people, of culture, that makes you more explorative? Because I think so many people in the UK, where we both live, find themselves comfortable within the boundaries of the island, as there's variety that's self-contained within it. The multiculturalism of London versus the lack of multiculturalism in North Wales, for example, is a different way of looking at things. But you've experienced and lived in cultures all over the world. So do you think that inherently makes you a little bit more inquisitive than it might do others?
Yeah, it might do. I mean, I grew up in an area of South Africa. So I was born in Zimbabwe, but we moved to South Africa when I was young. And I grew up in an area called Zululand. So we were really embedded in the Zulu culture and in their tribe. The Zulu tribe is one of the biggest tribes in Africa. I'm going to make up some figures here, but I think it's got over 2 million people in the tribe, and they got a king. And I speak Zulu, and I spoke it from a very young age. I've sort of lost a lot of the vocabulary now, but I guess, being immersed in a culture that was so different to mine and really enjoying it. I loved speaking Zulu and learning the language and wearing, my 10th birthday party was a Zulu party, and we all wore the animal skin skirts and, everything you see. I guess you guys would have seen it on TV, but we we saw it as if it was normal for us, growing up, my sister and I. And I guess maybe that was the fuel for it, understanding that there are more than one way to live a life. The Zulus, you can have 100 wives if you want. That's so different to where we live now and how we live. And I guess, maybe that's certainly, piqued my interest. But weirdly, I'm definitely more inquisitive the more different a culture is. Sort of, if it's quite close to, when I go to France, I'm inquisitive about the food and things like that. And but really, if my wife and I we did cycle toured around Cuba for our honeymoon, and places like that, and then I go all in. I go all in to find out everything about everything, the history, what happened to it, the food, the people. So I just have to. I think if it scratches that monkey in me who's just wants to try loads of different things all the time.
I've heard you say this before, that there is a monkey and a terrier contained within. Do you want to just explain what you mean by that and how it manifests day to day for you?
Yeah, so I knew, probably it was about 10 years ago, I knew I was not different, but I knew there was certain things in me that made me click, and it was a little bit, I found I was getting frustrated when some things weren't happening in life, and I just didn't really know what it was. And eventually I sort of decided to really try and think about it, and I was like, right, why are you frustrated right now, Sean? You've been frustrated for 3 or 4 months, why? And then I sort of looked back and realized I need to have something to chase in life, and it can be anything really. For me, the most beneficial aspect of something to chase is trying to do these world records, but it can be a hobby, learning woodworking and fixing a classic car or whatever. If I've got a project and it involves me to focus all my energy in it and go for it, and there's an end goal of fixing the car or cycling across Europe, I need that bit. But I can't do that forever, because then I get burnout. And I definitely got burnout in my last sort of life as a photographer, because that's all I did was chase. So on the flip side, to counterbalance the terrier who just chases things, I used to fight this concept of trying loads of different things. And I remember, and it sort of a lot of people say it's bad. When I grew up, my dad was like, you have 1 million hobbies and they only last a couple of weeks. And I sort of thought that was a bad thing. So for ages, I was fighting this inherent urge in me to try loads of different things, thinking, oh, that's a bad thing. And it wasn't just Dad. Everyone was just like, Sean, you were into motorbikes last week, and I, bought 10 motorbike magazines and cut out the picture and stuck them all over my wall. And then a month later, they came down, and something else went back up. But it turns out actually that's quite good for me. I have to try loads of different stuff, and it's good for my mental health, and I love it. I try everything, whatever, whether it's food, hobbies, learning new things, whatever it is. Exploring new trails around where I live. I've just got to try. I have to experience things I've not experienced before in life, and that's the monkey in me trying to, I'm inquisitive. I like to break things, fix things, do things with my hands. But if I don't chase something every now and then the monkey gets really agitated. So I sort of worked that out a couple of years ago. I have these two sort of animals within me that I have to feed, and then it's weird. Once I'd worked that out, and I hate putting names and labels and things, but for me it just became, right, well, I've got this character, and I'm going to call it a monkey because why not? And I've got this other character, I'm going to call it a terrier because why not? And as long as I keep them both fed, life is good. Life is very, very good. So yeah, that's kind of how I came up with that.
The variety you've explored there in your younger years, and the fact that you've not been what could be labelled as almost flitty between different things is in my mind not that it's exploration, but you've done it at an accelerated rate. You've put it in 2 times listening speed, as it were, and just gone through all the things. And all that is trial and error to explore what's truly valuable to you. And it sounds like what's truly valuable to you is actually the exploration of new things. And I love that you reflected that in your athletic career and your endurance career. And I know that being a photographer was a massive passion for you, but you mentioned there that you got caught in the metric chasing that came with it. Do you think the financial incentive and the commercial incentive of photography ruined photography for you?
Undoubtedly, yes. However, it's flippant to say now, looking back, I did chase the money, but then I sort of had to, in a way. And I've reevaluated what happened to me then, and if I clicked my finger and could change something, yes, I would not chase the money as much. But then I may have landed up on the street. I don't know, because I was a young photographer. I came to Britain with 100 quid in my wallet, landed up in a salad making factory in Ely in Cambridgeshire, making all those pre-mixed salads in basically a row of people just cutting up lettuces that would eventually go in the machine, which would go into the plastic bag for salads, right? And every day was hand to mouth. So from the age of 20 till about 25, I was working in a photo lab part time, earning like 700 quid a month. Living in London. So like most of that went to rent. Some of it went to food.
It doesn't go far.
So no, it doesn't go far. So yes, it's easy for me now to say because chase your dream and the money will follow. Yes, but it's not that easy sometimes. It's not just a black and white. What I wish I had done is just been a little bit more strict with how much money I made from the stuff I didn't enjoy. Because everyone needs to do stuff to put food on the table, food, shelter, warmth, right? And that costs money. Like, we're just in that world, so unless you manage to inherit some land and you want to go and live in the middle of nowhere and forage and have your own thing, which is great. I wish I could do that for my family, my kids, but I don't have land and I don't have the skill probably. But, there was a line where, maybe I needed 10 grand a year to survive in London. Maybe I should have earned my 10 grand doing the stuff I didn't enjoy, which would have freed up all the other time. But then you just get greedy. Then you're like, oh, well, it was quite easy to earn, that grand. Because at the time, I was photographing school kids at nursery school. And, if I photographed 100 kids on a day, I'd probably make 2 grand. Whereas if I went and photographed a cool editorial for a magazine, it would be 50 quid, 100 quid, and the 22-year-old in me was like, well,
there's a very obvious choice there, isn't there?
Yeah, so it was, what I should have done is just earned enough to survive in London, because it was expensive, and then done and then gone off and done the creative stuff, but I didn't. So I think that was my biggest thing. You need to chase some money, which is not a sexy or popular philosophy, but you've got to put food on. There's nothing, there's sort of there's taking care of your base needs. Once if you feel those are taken care of, all of a sudden you get more creative and you feel like you can do other stuff. Had I not taken care of those base needs, I probably wouldn't have been creative enough to do a good job for the magazines and and that sort of thing. So there was a little bit of a balance there, but certainly you're right. I sort of took it too far on the money side of things to thinking if I earned more money it would buy me some time, but it is the complete opposite happens, of course.
Do you ever pick up the camera now just for the joy of it?
I'm getting into video filmmaking, sort of. I have a little YouTube with three subscribers probably, and I do quite enjoy that side of things, but stills, no, nothing on the stills department really. I don't know. Every time I think of trying to do stills, other than just stuff with my phone, I sort of get this like panic attack of like, oh no, this is where it's gonna all go wrong. So no, I've never really considered getting back into the stills side of things.
I wonder if the passion that you had for photography as the young man that you just referenced, with the thought processes that you've mentioned there, I wonder if that passion was translated directly into your endurance challenges and your athletic pursuits, and therefore the itch that you were scratching with the photography and the freedom and the doing things in your own terms and looking at things in this financial way and being able to photograph others and bring their stories to life, however you want to dress it up. I wonder if that is the same mechanism that you've explored through that exploration of endurance and athleticism over the years. So how did you transition from that young man in London trying to make it as a photographer to the endurance athlete that I'd argue the most varied and eclectic endurance athlete the world has ever seen? Your CV is phenomenal, but it's also so creative, which I love. It's not ego, look at what I've done. It's look at how I've brought this story to life. Look at this country I've explored. Look at this new way I've done something. And that's what I find most valuable about adventures like yours is the story they tell, the journey they bring to life, rather than the pure athletic pursuit. Because I find the pure athletic pursuit, there's probably always going to be someone faster. There's probably always going to be somebody that can get more tech and do it in a different way. But being the first mover or bringing the story to life so somebody can feel like they were there with you is where the art truly is. And that's what I think you've done better than anyone on the planet, in my personal opinion. So before we dive into what all that looked like, how did you go from that young man in London to essentially the bloke you are today?
Well, it was gradual, you know. I mean, the transition, actual transition was hated photography, realised I couldn't do it anymore, so sold my business to my business partner for £1. And that was sort of my...
You have the quid framed at home, don't you?
I do. It's actually behind me.
Oh, is it there?
Yeah, you can see it on my wall there.
For anyone that's just listening, this is an incentive to go and subscribe to the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
So please, everyone go and do that. And Sean's whilst you're at it as well, as you've just dropped something about a run across Iceland, haven't you?
Yes, I ran across Iceland a couple of years ago, and just took me a while to edit that one. But so where were we? So practically, I was in this. I was living in London, very expensive. I didn't save any money doing the photography, nothing at all, zero, because I was sort of hand to mouth, and the photography was doing well, but James and I were growing the business, so we took out some big loans to pay for staff and offices and equipment and blah 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 blah. So when I sold the business for £1, which for me was to keep our friendship, James and I. He's like my best mate. He was the best man at my wedding, years after we finished the photography. I didn't want to ruin that for the sake of money. And then also, I was sort of putting a flag in the ground going, right, from now on, I'm not doing anything purely for money. Which, again, was very idealistic and, goes exactly against what I've just said earlier, because you do need to, sort of put food on the table. But what it did is it just engaged the terrier. It just said, right, terrier, go and get some food. So in my head I was like, right, well, I want to go traveling, because that was the dream with photography, is to use the camera to go traveling. What else can I do in that world? And I just thought, well, I could maybe try and do some magazine stuff, but no one's really probably going to pay me to go traveling the world for a whole year to do features, because without a portfolio. I could go and work abroad, but that sort of didn't really scratch an itch that I had. I didn't know what the itch was, to be honest. I knew that I just was miserable getting out of bed every day. And I just wanted, I think that was probably it. That was probably the sort of thing I wanted. I wanted something to chase, which would get me excited. So then I just sort of thought about it. I thought about Mark Beaumont, who had done his round the world bike ride years before. And that immediately, I just went down a rabbit hole of people who've done world records, whether it's climbing Everest or rowing oceans or cycling, and they all seem to have sort of sponsored logos on them. And I suddenly thought, well, they've just had a crazy idea and they've managed to go and get some funding from people. Maybe that's what I could do. Maybe I could just follow that sort of idea loosely, and so I sort of had. Well, I remember. I think it was I could survive in London for 3 months maybe after I sold the business, with, what was in the bank and some credit cards and things like that. So really was sort of quite stressed to make something happen. Otherwise, my fallback, luckily, I had a fallback, which was going to live with my mum in a 1-bedroom flat in Cheltenham. So I did have that at least. So I wasn't going to land up on the street. So yeah, that I sort of just got into trying to do something in the world of sort of adventure and sport and records, because it was a way to do something in the world of travel and get someone else to pay for it, basically. So that got me into the round the world bike ride. That was the first thing I tried, because I figured I could do it quite cheaply. It wasn't going to be that expensive to do, in the grand scheme of lots of the other things like Everest and South Pole and all that, or rowing an ocean. And I just went out and just tried to get funding, basically. And then, managed to get the funding and do that. And that didn't, I got run over in America, but still, and I carried on for charity. But when I got back, I sort of had stumbled across a way of living a new life, really. Even though I didn't know it at the time. When I got back from the round the world cycle, I tried to get back into work. I had no money. I signed on to the dole. I was on the dole, living with my mum in a 1-bedroom flat at the age of 31, going to the job centre every couple of weeks, applying for jobs in bike shops, in photographic studios, because obviously I needed to earn something. But I have no A levels, didn't go to university, so I was sort of, I wouldn't say unemployable, but I didn't really have a CV at all, So, yeah, tried that for a while. That didn't work.
So round one was Land's End, Johnny Groats on a bike, wasn't it? The length of Britain, cycling the length of Britain, and essentially
as a holiday, yeah.
A holiday, I can imagine, with some lessons
one,
along the way in making this up as you go along, building the wings as you fly, as I like to say. So, what were the harshest lessons from that first solo endeavour, and are there any lessons that you took from that are now something that you consider every time you take on a challenge, an event, or even day-to-day life?
Well, yeah, the lessons I learned from the Land's End John Groats first attempt was don't do it that way. So everything I did on there is how not to do it, basically. Don't do it in April, it's freezing cold. Don't carry 5 panniers, But I had to back then, it was pre-smartphone, so I had a Lonely Planet book of Britain, which is huge. It's bigger than the one for India. It's massive. It's amazing as well. I had a map guidebook, I had a camping guidebook, I had an actual book, Wilbur Smith. Read a couple of his books. So, one pannier was just full of paper, and then another one was full of cameras, and then the other one I had like casual shoes as well, even though I could completely walk in my cycling shoes, because they were sort of mountain bike ones with full tread, so I didn't even wear my casual shoes. I took a pair of jeans. Like, what were you thinking, man? So I guess, yeah, I learned to streamline. So after that trip, it was, I had too much kit, basically. But it was I found it quite easy. I think that was, because I'd done the Land's End John Groats cycle in 25 days, which is painfully slow. But I sort of found it easy. I enjoyed cycling, and I enjoyed going uphill, which even is something I enjoy now. I really like uphills. I'm not a big fan of downhills in any sport, really. So it's yeah, I guess I got the bug a little bit, but strangely, so I did that in 2008, and I remember getting back from Land's End John Groats, and I cleaned my bike and put it in the shed, and I was like, right, this is the beginning of, I'm going to go adventures every weekend. I'm going to start Audax riding. I was hooked. Unfortunately, I didn't pick up my bike again for like 2 years or something, because I just got sucked back into trying to put food on the table, So yeah, it left a mark on me, but it took something even more drastic for me to act on it, type thing,
And how did that experience and that 2-year recovery period or reflection period then spiral into doing a 4,200 mile triathlon around Great Britain? Because that doesn't sound like the musings of a man who's sick of riding their bike to me.
Yeah. Well, quite a few things happened in between that, really. So I did the round the world cycle, got back, tried to get work for 6 months, just didn't even get an email reply saying you haven't got the job type thing. So that's when I was like, well, I just need to get out of my mum's flat. You know, I was living on the sofa bed in a basement apartment with no windows in Cheltenham, and thought, well, you know, if I think of another record, maybe I'll get funding again. It'll just get me out of the house. You know, at least I'll be able to buy food for the, you know, if I choose something that's going to take 3-4 months long, at least the sponsorship will put food on my table during, you know, while I'm doing it. And that's when I thought of swimming Land's End to John O'Groats. So that happened in 2013. So that took 4.5 months, so a little bit longer than I told the support crew. You know, I put an advert. I remember putting an advert out in a magazine, and it was all expenses paid, summer sail up the British Isles, supporting a swimmer.
You're a con artist, Sean. You're a con artist.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Missold them there because I was still swimming in Blimmin' November. It's not what they signed up for, but they stayed, you know, so I owe them everything really. But when I finished that's, you know, my life changed overnight on that swim. I woke up the next day with sponsors emailing me wanting to, you know, fund the next thing, and book deals, and TV people going, you look a bit weird and interesting, you know, what do you want to do next? We'll film it type thing. And that's when I did the run. So to finish the triathlon of Britain. So I'd done the cycle, done the swim, so I thought, right, well, might as well run it now just to tick that box. So then I ran from John O'Groats back to Land's End, and that was fun. I took 2 attempts on that one, really. I got injured on the first attempt, which seems to be my trademark lately.
Didn't you get injured?
Which is warring.
Running whilst taking a selfie? Am I right in saying? Is that how that happened?
I do actually. I'll go.
Have you got the selfie?
This is funny. Hold on. I've got the newspaper article that the Sun printed.
I bet they tore you a new one, as the Sun does best.
Thought I'd frame this to my kids, be like, oh look,
selfie harm. Oh no.
Quite insensitive to people. But anyway, it's so I was doing a video selfie, so they took the screen grabs of the video. I was basically running along and didn't see a rock. That was a tiny little rock, but it just did enough to injure my my knee. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I probably, had I not fallen there, probably would have twisted my ankle anyway. I wasn't run fit. That's the first time I'd really taken up running. When I was what? How old was I then? 34 is pretty much the first time I started running. Other than, you know, I did cross country at school and that sort of thing. But yeah, so I wasn't really run fit. So that injury came on because I wasn't run fit really. But yeah, the selfie was the start of it. So yeah, so that was that's happened in 2015. And then the triathlon around Britain was 2016, which again, you know, once I'd done the swim, it was actually before it was actually when I did the round the world bike ride, is I came up with this philosophy, this idea of trying to get the 3 Fs of endurance, which is the world's first, furthest, and fastest. And you know, thanks for your compliment on me, you know, being able to tell stories and doing things like that. Yes, I do enjoy doing those type of adventures, like climbing Kilimanjaro in a penguin suit or running a marathon in every national park in the UK. But I sort of know I can do those, where for the terrier to be scratched, I need to do something really difficult as well. So I do have to do the athletic ones. You know, so like cycling around the world the fastest, first person to swim the length of Britain, you know, first person to do the length of Britain triathlon. So yeah, the 3 Fs, first, furthest, and fastest, was something I was, you know, at the back of my mind thinking, right, can I get a record in all 3 of those categories? So the swim was the first, and then the triathlon around Britain was going to be the furthest, the longest triathlon ever completed. So that sort of took me up to 2016, I guess.
So how much of what you do is driven by ego? How much is driven by exploration? How much is driven by intrinsic fulfillment? What at the core of the things that you do drives you forwards?
My answers changed on this over the years. A lot of it was sort of like, oh, I'd like to help others and, inspire other people, which is true. That is, it's one of the carrots that I dangle in front of myself. Raising money for charity. Ego's an interesting one. I mean, mammals all need an ego thing, and I'd be lying if I don't enjoy telling a good pub story sometimes to a few people, but not often. I often steer away from being the center of attention in groups of people. I'm not an alpha, so I will I'm the guy who hides in the corner and just
drinks Guinness, I've heard.
Basically, yeah, exactly. So, however, I do, and I have this vision in my head of, my kids growing up and, coming to me one day and going, wow, Dad, no way, you were the first person to swim the length of Britain. So there's that ego that I really enjoy. I enjoy doing the stuff that I know my kids are going to be like, wow, Dad, that's cool. Although I've been told no kids think their parents are cool, so I'm wasting my time anyway. But I think it's weird. So it's definitely the intrinsic fulfillment. I definitely feel like that is an important reason why I do it. But once I've done something, I sort of forget about it. I write the book and then it's done. I very rarely go back to other stuff. So it's not like I'm feeling fulfilled now about the time I swam the length of Britain. So yes, I needed that goal to get to John O'Groats and to get to the finish line. And for me, I needed to, tick that box and complete that for the terrier to feel happy. But I just enjoy like who I am when I do these big things. I enjoy the training. I enjoy the logistics and the planning and trying to get sponsorship. So if I got something that takes 2 years to sort of put together, like what I'm trying to do now in my next record, is, I'm just more fulfilled in the whole process than when I'm not doing it. And that in itself is enough for me to repeat it, if you know what I mean.
Do you think it's an addiction? A form of addiction?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And everything's addictive about it. Completing it's addictive. Writing the book is addictive. And I love having the books on my shelf and just look. All my books are in my downstairs toilet. So when I go for a pee, they're just there. And I'm like, oh, this is cool. I never read them back and no one else reads them in my family. But I just like the fact they're there. And that's addictive, And I'm addicted to thinking up the next record or whatever it is, or idea, whether it's one of the big ones or one of the smaller ones. So yeah, it's all. I'm a better person, which sounds cheesy, while I'm attempting these sort of things than I am if I don't have them on my cards, type thing.
Have you thought about what happens when you get to a point in your life where you can't push it any further?
La 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 la. What? Sorry, what was that question? I didn't hear.
What question? I didn't ask a question. That's the voice inside your head, Sean.
Oh, exactly.
That's the voice inside your head when you're 18 days deep into something.
No, I mean, at the moment, just blissful ignorance. And I have those conversations with Caroline, my lovely, long-suffering wife. No, it's a worry, because I sort of am in the world of sport rather than the world of adventure. I'm a 42-year-old sportsman. There's not many of us sort of competing and still trying to, do things at a level at which you could still make a living from it, i.e. get sponsorships, sell books, do talks, and all that stuff that puts food on my kids' plates, right? So I consider myself very lucky. What's after? I don't know. I don't think I have to think about it for a while. I think I've got another 5 years, at least, before I then will probably have to hang up the high-end competitive ultra-endurance stuff. But maybe not. I've always thought I'd get into running a bit later in life, so I could probably push the running for another, maybe 7 or 8 years, potentially, if I'm good. I don't know if I'm any good, though. So, either that or just become the most badass PE teacher ever. I'm sorry, sir, I stubbed my toe. You don't know pain, boy.
The sad thing is, I can imagine you tell your PE classes what you've been up to, and they'd be sitting in the change room afterwards thinking, God, he talks a load of shit, doesn't he? He said he
Yeah,
swam end to end of the UK. Honestly, these PE teachers these days, what are they talking about?
I know.
So we'll talk about what's next.
So,
about what's next very soon. But I think it's important to unpack a little bit of what didn't go so well along the way, because we've talked about selfie-harm. We've talked about a few of the hiccups you've had along the way. But in the space that you operate within, the three Fs, there's always going to be naysayers. There's going to be people that want you to fail. There's going to be people that say things aren't possible. And they will relish when things don't go to plan. And it's very easy as a human being to catastrophize and think that you failed and that everything you've done has been a waste and futile, when in reality, as I'm sure you'll agree, as I've heard you say before, the lessons in failure are significantly more valuable than arguably success in the endeavours, because it gives you the toolbox for next time, and that's compounding over time, which makes you the person that you are today. So what have been the biggest setbacks along the way, the most unpredictable ones, the ones that have really sent you into a bit of a spiral? Because you've already mentioned how well you manage your mental health by knowing what's good for you and really focusing on those things. But when things do go wrong, which they will, how have you managed them, and what are the things that have really knocked you back the most?
So, there's a scale of things going wrong. You know, there's things that will go wrong daily, but you can get over them. So that you got to do certain things to get over them. So when you're trying to break a world record and you're cycling across Russia and there's headwinds and wolves and things, and there's bits there going wrong because you're behind schedule and it's cold and you can't camp out because of the wolves. So you just got to think quite practically, and there's a side of me that's quite practical, where I think of the six pistons of endurance: planning, food, water, sleep, muscle management, and motivation. What can I do in those six things that I can control, which will help me get through this and break a record type thing, especially when there's a time element. That seems to be the thing that's the hardest to overcome, because when I did my world's longest triathlon or swam the length of Britain, the only time imposed element to it was self-imposed. So I could have done the swim over 3 years, and come home and taken a break and gone back out the next summer when the weather was good. But for me, that I needed to do it in a oneer. And the same with the world's longest triathlon. I could have done that over 6 or 8 months, really, and just sort of done it slowly and had some fun. But for me, I wanted it to be a physically difficult journey as well, because I wanted to train hard, and that got the terrier excited. So, but if there was a bad day on either of those two, for example, I could take the day off, and if there was bad weather, and it wouldn't change to many things. But when you're going for a speed record like the cycling across Europe record, that's when you have bad road quality, or you get punctures, or there's just big trucks and you've chosen a dodgy road and you're 20 miles short on each day for days on end, and you can see the record slipping away. That's difficult to deal with. But how I cope with it is just trying to focus on the things I can manage. Yes, there's big trucks on the road. Are there big trucks on the road at 2 a.m? Maybe not. So maybe I should shift my cycling time to night time. But then at 2 a.m, there's lots of people who've had too much vodka. So there's all those sort of questions I was asking myself. So those are the things that you sort of can not that you can control them, but you can do certain things that hopefully will start making you win. Because basically, I'm trying to win, right? And the things that really hit me back is when stuff happens out of my control, like an injury. Injury is the big one. In any sports person will tell you that, when you get injured and it's taken away from you, whatever you're trying to get, it's very hard to overcome that, really. I've got quite short memory, so I'm quite good at bouncing back. I sort of forget the bad stuff quite quickly, and I don't know if that's on purpose or just the way my brain is wired, but I do forget the bad stuff pretty quickly, and can really shift. That's when the monkey just takes over and be like, right, that didn't work, right, let's try something else, boom, okay, and now I'm down that path. And that works for me. I don't know if it's the best strategy even long term, but it seems to work for now.
You've been hit off your bike several times over the years, haven't you? And it's got in the way of the plan, I think it's fair to say. As being hit by a car when you're on your bike tends to do, to be quite honest. And there was one that got in the way of your trip around the world quite severely, didn't it? And it was actually probably the worst. Is it fair to say the worst hospitalisation injury you've had as a result of living the life that you have? Was the round the world cycle you hit by?
Well, yeah, and the only one really. In fact that's the only time I've been hit by a car on the bike. So that was bad, but I actually don't remember anything, so that was quite useful. The brain has a way of shutting off the bad stuff, so I went to bed the night before and woke up the next day in hospital. So I'd woken up that morning, I'd cycled for a couple of hours, I got run over from behind, went straight up onto the windscreen, or apparently, and then I sort of have some memories now, but I'm not sure if they're actual memories or just dreams I've had since, or just fabricated stuff in my head. But I sort of remember leaving the motel I was staying in the night before. I sort of remember the road, but not really. I went back. So to carry on with the bike ride after I recovered, I went back to the place where I got run over, and I have zero memory of it. Nothing, absolutely nothing. So, which is probably quite good. The fact I have no trauma there, probably meant I carried on cycling, because maybe I wouldn't have had it been this big pain and noises and crashing and head hitting the windscreen and all that. Maybe that would have been too much for me to handle. So
when you came around from that and the reality had checked in of such a big event, commitment from sponsors, commitment from yourself in terms of time away, all of this that had gone into it, how did you manage the huge spike in emotion in terms of confronting that? Because when things go wrong in people's lives day to day, it's very difficult to manage that spike in emotion. I think Zone 2 endurance, that side of my training, has really helped me day to day better manage that through putting me in a calmer, more deliberative state of mind. And you've spent weeks, months in that state of mind. So I can imagine you're very good at managing those spikes on a day-to-day basis. But when faced with that situation, just talk us through the feelings, the things you were tackling in your head when you came around the hospital thinking, oh, here we are.
Well, a couple of things happened. The first one was Guinness had a rule that you had to do it on the same bike. You could change components and things like that, but you had to do it on the same bike. So the first thing I remember saying is, how's the bike? And they said, oh, it's a write-off. So I sort of had this first thing of but it's a steel frame. I'm sure someone can fix it. I'll just get it fixed and I'll carry on. So there was a bit of denial at the beginning on how serious I was injured. And I truly believed 5 days I'll be back on the bike. I even said that because, with the record, anything more than that, you're out of the record anyway. But I thought, I feel fine. I'll wear a neck brace. 5 days, I'll be fine. I then realized that wasn't going to be 5 days. So then there was another rule that Guinness had in the rule book, which was if you reach an impassable barrier, you're allowed to stop the clock. They've got rid of this rule now, and I'm glad they have got rid of it because it's a rubbish rule. And you could stop for 2 weeks. So really, you could have 2-week rest breaks in between this staged bike ride around the world. It was stupid. But they've got rid of that now, and it's a continuous clock. So I emailed them and said, does an accident fall under I've reached an impassable barrier, and can I stop the clock? And they actually replied back and they said, we've looked at it, and yes, you can. So you've got 2 weeks off. So I was like, okay, well, that buys me 2 weeks within the rules. And then the next thing was, right, let me try and get the bike fixed. So we sent the bike off to a bike shop to have a look. It was the rear stays, basically the rear triangle was bust. Could they weld on a new triangle there? And they came back and they said, no, it's too long gone. There's no way we can do it accurately so the wheel runs true and all that. So then I emailed Guinness again and said, right, well, I've been in this accident. I'll keep all the components. So I'll keep, except the rear wheel, but I'll keep the front wheel and everything else. The roll-off hub was still intact, so I could reuse that. Can I just get a new frame and, carry on the bike ride after this 2-week thing? And they said, okay, yes, you can do that as well. So I was very much in this sort of scenario of, right, I can carry on now, definitely. So the 2 weeks came and went. and I definitely wasn't ready to get on the bike. And I was sort of doing the maths, and it basically every day my average was going up something like 5 or 10 miles a day. I'd have to do on average more to get the record. So I was averaging about 180 or 190, somewhere there, up to that point, miles a day. And then, for every day it was like all of a sudden I'd have to do 195, and then 200, and then 205, and then eventually it got to a point where my average was going to need to be like 210 or 215 miles a day for the rest of the ride. And I just knew that was just impossible. So then that was the realization of like, right, well, I can't do this now. Like, I probably can't get this record. So I thought, right, well, I'm just going to go home. And that was my chance. I had my chance, and that was it. Then while I was packing up my stuff and going through all my kit, I saw that I had a little Olympic flame that some kids made me to take around the world, because it was 2012 in London. So I said, "Oh, Sean, can you take a replica Olympic flame around the world? They're little batteries with, fake lights to glow and that sort of thing." It was really cute, and I thought, these 5-year-olds using 3D printers and stuff. It was amazing. I was like, of course I'm going to take your little flame around the world. So I suddenly thought, wow, man, these kids are going to be gutted. So what if that's just my new goal? Maybe my new goal is I can't get the record now. That's pretty clear. But maybe my new goal is to get around the world in time for the Olympics and take these kids their flame back. And then this wonderful family I stayed with, Martin and Missy Carey, who looked after me, and I stayed with them in their home. Really, I couldn't have done it without them. They bought me a new bike as well. They phoned Thorn in Somerset, and that was the bike I used, and said, "Remember, Sean, send us a bike, we'll pay for it." So they were just incredible in basically getting me a new bike. And so that sort of became my new goal. So to answer your question, how do I get over it? I sort of just gave myself a new thing to chase, which was trying to get back to London in time for the Olympics. So I had nearly a month off with the injury, carried on still with a neck brace, because I had a bit of whiplash. I have a compression fracture in my spine, which is sort of fine now. But I think they say two of my vertebrae might fuse when I'm older. But I think I only had to do 135 or 140 miles a day from then on, just to get back to London in time for the Olympics. So that sort of became my new goal and my new challenge, and that allowed me to scratch the terrier in me. Otherwise, I think I would have just got really frustrated had I carried on in holiday mode, as it were, which I don't think I could have done.
I think the core of that as well is looking at the situation you are presented with and being realistic about what you can do with it. Again, that's a fancy way of saying the social media contrived statement that we've all heard 1,000 times, which is control the controllables. But you were faced with overwhelming variables and managed to reframe them into the same mechanism that you were following in the first place, just in a different sort of manifestation of that. So I think that's the main lesson there, is essentially take the situation for what it is and try and solve the problem in front of you, rather than the problem that you had planned for in the first place, because the circumstances have changed. And I think that's a mistake I've made definitely in my younger years, of setting a plan based around the circumstances I expected, and then holding myself to those circumstances even when they've changed, which puts you in the wrong environment to solve the problem and just allows those emotions and your management of the situation to spiral. So lots of things that people can take away there from that. But coping mechanisms.
I also had this I also had this overriding sort of thought and notion that no one gets to ride around the world twice. So
Mark
the option of sort of
a little bit,
giving up, except Mark's ruined that. And actually, Nick Sanders, who had the record in the 80s, he also did it twice. I knew there's no way I could go and get the funding again and all that sort of thing. So this was sort of my shot at doing it. There's other stuff where I've got injured and I've just bailed because that was the right thing to do. You've not failed, you've just learned the wrong way to do it. So you go home and go back to the drawing board and start again. But with around the world, being in America and far from home, for me it was like, right, I carry on and have this new goal, or I go back to a 1-bedroom flat with my mum in Cheltenham. So actually, it was almost an easy decision, really.
So the coping mechanisms along the way is the question that people are always so keen to hear. Oh, what were you thinking about? How did you manage? What were you doing that I can't perceive to be able to do differently? Pedro is something that sticks out to me. And
he's on my wall as well.
You've got Pedro. Him. I didn't know you had him. Fantastic. There he is.
So I managed to get him back. I managed to get him back on a flight from Russia, even though it makes a mockery of having to take your shoes off. And I had a dead dog skull in my baggage.
So for context, Pedro was a dog skull you found on the side of the road that you then essentially felt an emotional attachment to, whether due to fatigue or otherwise.
Absolutely.
That then came with you. Yeah. And the irony I find most hilarious is that a skull probably weighs what? Half a kilo?
280. I weighed it. It was 280 grams.
Okay.
And I didn't take a tent across Europe to save 300 grams. So it was basically, I just replaced having a tent, which is a very useful and important thing to have, with a dead dog skull, which is very unimportant and unuseful.
So
although I will take that back a little bit, because we solved many world problems together, me and Pedro.
But that's a great way of looking at this, because when people often ask about coping mechanisms, especially in an athletic sense, triathlon, ultras, people are very, very anal about this sort of thing, and it's very fiercely practical and often fails to account for the human behind the practicality. And there's two things that I think really bring this to life from your perspective, from what I've heard, which is the example you've just given. You chose something that gave you a bit more intrinsic push forwards that superseded the practicality of the decision, but the morale was more important than the actual weight considerations at that point, because you are the human powering this forwards, and for the human body to be able to cope, the mind needs to be able to keep up and move at the same pace. So what were the strategies that the second one we'll come back to, but what were the strategies that you implement when you're taking on these things to be able to cope with the challenges, to be able to cope with the loneliness, to be able to cope with the dread and constant calculation of records and being in this place at that time and everything that goes with these things?
Well, there's quite a few little things. I already touched on the 6 pistons of endurance, of planning, food, water, sleep, muscle management, and motivation. So, I'm constantly looking at all of those, and especially when you're self-supported, they're never going right. You've slept too much or too little, and you're not hydrated enough. Your food's rubbish because you're living out of service stations. You're sleeping in drain pipes where wolves hang out, and so none of them are really good. But within that, if you looked at all of them, let's say the motivation one also has a couple of extra sort of branches to it, which will be, why are you doing it, and what's going to not make you stop, what's going to keep you going, and that could be things like, raising money for charity, wanting to write a book about it at the end. So there's a bit of the ego thing there, trying to pretend, one day my kids are going to think I'm cool. There's that. So I dangle those carrots in front of me in the motivation pie chart part of that as well. So yeah, there's a lot of practical side there. And then, but if that's all the terrier, and if the terrier is just too practical, the monkey needs to sort of knock on his shoulder and go like, dude, this is fun, man. Like, you chose to do this. No one's making you do this. Oh, look, there's a dead dog on the side of the road. He's been there for a long time. He must be lonely. Let's show him what Europe looks like. And that's the other side of me, which is equally important to feed, that side of me that doesn't take it too seriously, which is weird because it depends on, people come and meet me on some of the records, not the Europe record. A few people came and found me on the Europe record, but the stuff I've done in Britain, someday there's probably two bands of people. Some people go like, well, he was quite serious about what he was doing. And then, the next person who met me half an hour later was like, man, he's just really not taking this seriously at all.
So the second part I wanted
it probably
to focus
depends
on
what mood I'm in. Yeah.
Was on exactly that, because you were running Length of Britain and you thought, oh, I've got to pop into Wales, don't I? And popping into Wales turned into quite the visit, didn't it?
The best lock-in I've ever had in a pub in my life. And it had nothing to do with me, really. So if you're in Wales, Matt Pritchard, who was in Dirty Sanchez,
and is an absolute weapon of an ultra endurance athlete himself as well. It's worth mentioning.
Absolutely, he's done Deca Ironmans. He used to have the record for the most number of half Ironmans done in a row. I joined him for one of them, and obviously, if you've watched him on Dirty Sanchez, he has a persona of just being a bit crazy, and he sort of is crazy. What does he say? And he self-describes himself as burning the candle at both ends and in the middle, and he definitely is kind of just all in. But the thing he struggles with is whenever he meets people, they expect the crazy Matt who just parties and drinks the whole time, when actually he's vegan now and has written some amazing cookbooks and does all these Ironmans. So anyway, we walked. That was the idea. I was going to divert into Wales because I had to, and he was going to meet me, and we were going to have a pint. I literally went over the bridge. We walked into this pub, and obviously the landlord was like, "Wow, it's Matt Pritchard. This is going to be epic." So we got there late. It was sort of about 10 o'clock or 10:30, thinking, we'll get a pint in, make 2 pints, and we said, "Oh, mate, do you mind if we just sleep in the garden?" And he's like, "Yeah, that's cool, that's cool." Anyway, got to 11 o'clock, and everyone else is sort of starting to leave the pub. He's, "You guys, no, don't worry, you can stay. That's cool. No, don't worry. Okay, well, thanks, mate." So we stayed, and it got to 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and we're just like necking beers like it's no going backwards. And in my head, it's like, "Oh, brilliant! This is calories. This is great. 200 calories a pint. Bring it." And eventually at 3:30, the landlord says, "Oh, guys, I'm really sorry, but my wife's at home. We've got a 6-month-old baby or whatever. And we're like, "Oh, don't worry, mate. It's blooming 3 a.m. Don't we'll just crash." He's like, "Oh, no, I have to go, but you guys can stay." We're like, "What?" He's like, "Here's a piece of paper. Just write down whatever you drink and sort me out in the morning." We're like, "You joking?" And I think it was like 5:30. The sun was coming up. We eventually said, "Right," because I slept a marathon the next day, and he was going to run it with me. And halfway through that, my mate Jez came on his bicycle from London. He caught the train to Bristol. And then cycled in. So then Jez was in the mix. So 5:30, we eventually were like, "Right, we better get some sleep." 8:30 in the morning, all I hear is, "Conway, let's go, boyo!" And he put a double Southern Comfort in front of me, so I necked that, and then we started running this marathon. Then we were running back over the bridge. It was like crazy 48 hours or 24 hours, whatever it was. This French guy jumps out in front of me and goes, "Sean, I found you!" And we're like, "What?" He's like, "I've hitchhiked all the way from France. It's taken me 5 days to find you. And I went to the wrong bridge." And then he jumped in front of the road and basically stopped an elderly couple who then he said, "Take me to the other bridge." Because he basically needed to get to the Severn Bridge, but there's 2, of course. And so this elderly couple took this random French guy, and then he found me on the bridge. And then he ran with me for 2 days as well, with like just a rubbish school bag as a backpack, sleeping in bushes as well. Anyway, yeah, we ran so Jez was on his bicycle, Matt with his dog Lemmy, me, both of us the worst for wear, and this French guy all ran a marathon into Bristol that day. So yeah, it was a very memorable 24 hours. And Matt, he's a good guy. He's a good guy. Just don't go to pub with him.
No, I think that seems to be the clear lesson taken from that is do not go to the pub with Matt, especially if you need to run the next day. But there'll be people listening to that are losing their minds thinking about the performance compromise that comes with such an endeavour, and a arguably series of poor decisions or spending time with somebody that will allow you to make poor decisions. And obviously, it's not the right thing to be doing from a hydration, nutrition, recovery, sleep quality point of view at all. But the morale boost and the story that goes with it and the humanity that brings that to life contributes to your ability to keep plodding your way up north towards John O'Groats, doesn't it? And I think that's what's often lost in translation with these endeavours is the fun, is the journey, is the adventure. And I know that you are often thrown in as an adventurer when you are an adventure athlete, you're an endurance athlete in your own right. But adventure is where the value really lies in my mind. And I think stories like that one and Pedro, and I know you've had police escorts because you felt like there were drug runners that were potentially going to steal your bike, or worse in certain parts of the world. And there's all these things that have gone on. But those are the memories that will stick with you for taking the first step towards something adverse, challenging, scary, intimidating, first mover effect, whatever it might be. And you're about to take on something that's rather large. And it's very soon.
Yeah.
It's in basically it's a month
there's a
yesterday.
fourth
isn't it?
category.
Yeah, there's
It's a month yesterday, yeah. It turns out there's a fourth category, which I can't believe it took me 10 years to work out. But basically, there was the 3 Fs of endurance. So in the world of sport, I was trying to get those 3 Fs. The world's first, the furthest, and the fastest. And I got all of those when I got the Europe record. And that was in 2018. And then sort of my new life started. I got married, I had a couple of kids, and then COVID happened. And I genuinely was, and Caroline will sort of back me up. I was getting quite frustrated, and I didn't know what I was doing. Yes, I was enjoying being a new dad, and I was 40 when I bought my first house, and that was terrifying because I never dreamt of even earning enough money to buy a house. So 40, that happened. So life was good. I got 2 amazing boys, but there was just something that I needed to scratch, and I was very nervous about going back and dotting the I's and crossing the T's, because I'd done these 3 big things, and I didn't want to feel like I was just now doing stuff for the sake of it. I really wanted to find stuff that was going to challenge me and engage the terrier again. And then I found out that there's a fourth category, which is the most of something, and I was like, and
doesn't begin with an F though. It's not quite as.
It doesn't begin with an F. I can't tell you how annoyed I am by that. Well, someone did say the most frequent. I think someone tried to put that.
Kind of doesn't, but if you wanted to,
kind of works. Kind of doesn't. Yeah, exactly. It's stretching the thing there. But I then sort of thought back to the most record I was going to go for, but I didn't realize it was going to be a category, was back after I'd done the Europe cycle in 2018. James Lawrence had got the record for the most number of Ironmans in a row at that point. He had done 50 Ironmans in 50 days in 50 states in America. Okay, sorry, I can't say Ironmans. I keep saying Ironmans. Sorry, Ironman. It's not an Ironman. It's a full distance triathlon. Because an Ironman's an actual sanctioned event. So
Ironman is a brand. I don't want anyone listening to let that organisation get away with what they're trying to do, which is pretend that they own the distance, which they do not. Ironman is a brand that puts on full distance triathlon events, and it's the most popular brand in the world. However, they are not the only brand that you can do full distance triathlon events with. Exactly. It's important to mention. You could. Yeah, so but I'm going to say Iron Woman. How about that? It's even better. And so, yes, I was he'd done 50 in 50 days in 50 states. Incredible. And I lived in the Lake District, and I thought, I wonder if I could do 100. So I had this idea back in 2018. I even looked at a route, a course, so swimming in the lake, super easy. Cycling down towards Barrow and Furness, where it's a bit flatter, and then back to Coniston, and then 2 laps of the lake as a marathon. So I'd already done all that prep. And then, as always with any sport, I have quite a few ideas, and I pitch them to sponsors, and I pitched this one, and I pitched a few others, and one of the other ones, which hasn't happened because of COVID, and it's going to happen hopefully in 2025, 2026. That was the ones a couple of my sponsors were, let's this one sounds cool, let's do that one. But then COVID happened, and then it didn't happen, and then it didn't happen, and it didn't happen. It was going to be like, in 6 months we'll do it, and no, in another 6 months. So then I decided at the beginning of last year to revisit this most record, which is the full distance triathlon, knowing that James Lawrence had done the 101. So in my head, I was like, I've got to do 102 now. I always wanted to do it to see if I could do 100 anyway. So that was January, February last year. And stupidly, really, and this is another problem I have, is the monkey and the terrier also want stuff done quickly. So I tried to do it last year in June, and really it just wasn't enough time to get enough funding, to get crew who had experience, time of year, all that sort of thing. I was kind of rushing it, but
I believed I could do it. I physically believed I could do it, and I probably could have done it had I not come off the bike. I would have just been a bit miserable doing it, and also in hindsight, it's just not the way I wanted it to play out. Like, do you draw or paint at all?
I wish.
Have you ever
wish
done
I
a drawing
could.
or a painting? Yeah. I mean, if anyone's done a painting, how many times will you do it and you'll be like, you get like 20% in and you'll be like, this is crap, I'm going to tear it up and I'm going to start again. I sort of, because it's not working out how you imagined it and the creative side of me imagined it. And so when I attempted it in June, it wasn't working out. I came off the bike anyway, and it was a real feeble crash. Trying to get some food out my back pocket, hit a pothole, overcorrected, and steered into a bush. But my left leg stayed clipped in, and it just caused a bit of inflammation on the tendon that runs on the top of my foot, the one that keeps your foot up. So it keeps your toes up if you want to pull your toes up, type thing. And that just got worse. So that was day 5, day 6. By day 7, it was just I couldn't walk basically. But it sort of wasn't working out the way I'd pictured it, and that was my own fault because I was trying to rush it and I didn't, have everything in place that I should have had in place. So then I recovered, and then the reattempt is now going to be in April this year. So yeah, going for 102 full distance triathlons starting in April, which I feel pretty good. I was ill in January, so I'm probably 10% down on where I wanted to be from a sort of hitting the markers on pace and heart rate and power and speed and all that sort of thing. But it's still enough. It's still enough. I feel good. And my crew's amazing. This charity's come on board, and we're trying to raise money here in North Wales specifically to try and create a fully sustainable youth triathlon team. So there's a couple of like run clubs and swim clubs and cycle clubs have teamed together. But what often happens is each of those clubs want their athlete to be a really good swimmer and then a really good cyclist and a really good runner. But with triathlon, you're sort of a little bit worse at all three, but you're good overall. So they'll end up getting burnt out. So we're, together with the foundation, we're trying to really get a real positive, really good youth triathlon team here in Wales. So yeah, that's super exciting. So I've got crew, good crew now, a really amazing crew to help me on this one. So yeah, touch wood, I'm not going to fall off the bike again. So no taking packets of crisps out my back pocket on a slow uphill, even though it is slow.
Well, no, fantastic endeavour to be taking on. Do you want to just quickly give us an overview of the practicality, logistics, where you're doing it, how you've set it up? Same route every day, any variety, because it's a monotonous, long thing to execute, but you also want to reduce the amount of friction that goes into it. So just talk us through the practicalities.
Yeah, so I'm basically, because James Lawrence has owned this space, you sort of got to do whatever he did in the past if you want to take on his record. Really, you want to do it his way. I didn't do that the first time. I wanted to do an open water swim, but that practically landed up being a poor decision, just from a logistics point of view. Trying to get to the lake and back from the lake to start the bike ride, I was losing nearly 45 minutes just doing that. So now I'm doing the swim in the swimming pool here in Mold, North Wales. Then jumping straight on the bike, heading down towards Cheshire, doing a course down there, and then finishing near Chester on the River Dee or the train track back into Chester from Dee side, Queensferry. So yeah, same course every day, which makes it easier for people to come and join me, which I'm welcoming. And it's the only course that's achievable where I live.
Yeah, really. No, I actually know the area really well because my parents live in the North Wirral, and whenever I've been with them, I've done long bike rides into Chester, come over into Queensferry, out towards Colwyn Bay on the bike and back, and yeah, that's the only route I was thinking that would allow flatness.
Yeah, I needed flat, but I also needed quiet back roads. Yeah. Because, when I was looking at James, when people, there's days where 200 cyclists joined James, and I needed roads that could accommodate cyclists safely. So I've sort of done that. And then a pool swim, because he did a pool swim, and it's logistically the best, the most sensible way to do that. and then the run's pretty flat along the D there. So, and it's traffic free run as well, which is important. So anyone can join me on that. So that's happening. Yeah, for 1 month yesterday. So yeah, I feel good.
I don't know how much of it's playing up to camera or it was just cleverly edited by his team, but I have seen James put out a reel where he almost called you out a little bit for having taken it on the first time, based on conversations you had or his perception on things. I don't know how much back and forth there was between the two of you, but I don't know if you saw it. How did that narrative make you feel?
I didn't see it. Loads of people tagged me in, so I gather he said something untoward about what I did, which surprised me because he's been amazing. We've been messaging back and forth privately, and he's been telling me how to do it. He's been awesome.
That's what makes me wonder if he's had an editor or somebody say, "Oh, say this because this will get."
No. I think he said it. No. I think. I don't think what he said was that bad. I think
it wasn't. It was essentially. I think it was essentially leaning into the fact that because you haven't done an Ironman distance event that can be seen and tracked online, and you can check a finish list because you haven't done one before, you have no right to be attempting 102. No. But your CV proves that without much experience in swimming in open water, you swam from the bottom end to the north end.
There's probably a couple of things that happened there. It's a good story for him, for me to fail. And then, the question, maybe there was a question that led him into saying, because I know he talks about you can't go from 0 to 100. So me failing is probably really backs up his philosophy, which is true. You can't. But he probably doesn't know what I've done in the past. And, the fact that I'm a complete novice. I think he thinks I'm a complete novice, which is fine. I don't expect him to go on my website and trawl through what I've done in the past. Like no one, not even my parents do that. So it's which is fine. That's that's just the world of sport, and it's a good story for him for me not to have made it. But he's been super supportive. I did some testing the other day. Yesterday, in fact, and I put a thing on Instagram. He messaged me yesterday dude, why are you doing a VO2 max? It's a waste of time, dude. Come on, man. And I was like, dude, actually, it wasn't a VO2 max, and I sort of agree with you that it's a waste of time doing a VO2 for what we're doing. But he's been super supportive, actually. He's been amazing. Yeah, he's he's one of my heroes, and actually, I find it quite difficult that the world's going to make it a me versus him thing. And I didn't appreciate that the first time round. I really... he has a really strong supporter of people who will see me as the enemy, and I sort of wasn't prepared for that because everything else I've done, it hasn't been a me versus them. We've sort of been, when I took Jonas Deichmann's across Europe record, he helped me, and it was sort of I embraced his record, and we did it. He helped me, and then he went on and broke my world's longest triathlon record last year, so I helped him. So there was always that camaraderie. Even within the comments and everything, whereas this one it seemed that
it did seem a bit more. It seemed a bit more point scoring, and as if people online had earned the right to be the gatekeeper for James's record, when in reality even James isn't the gatekeeper to his own record. He can't prevent other people from giving it a go, but he is giving you his support, so therefore. Nobody else has the right to. Nobody else has the right to sort of protect it from their perspective. But
it was getting quite fierce as well, and there was quite a lot of people. Even the fact that I was saying Ironmans because I sort of don't care if they try and sue me, whereas he was really, really quite protective of people not saying the word Ironman.
Well, I think he got sued off the back.
They were quite nasty
CNN
to him
using it.
Yeah,
I think CNN wrote an article about him, and then Ironman sued him. And I think just the admin that goes with that must make you want to just keep things calm. But
yeah, exactly. So it was interesting. So so there was a whole lot of stuff around that. Stop that. And that sort of thing. So there was a lot of I can't believe he's using the word Ironman. Oh. I was like, okay, well maybe I should take it more seriously because maybe being sued by it. Ironman isn't fun, so
well, I hope you don't need to find out. But
as long as I don't,
I am thrilled to be seeing you taking on something, and having somebody else take it on gives a new perspective on what it entails, which is fantastic. It adds to the sport, it adds to the human story behind it. It makes James seem a bit more fallible. It gives more of a data pool for people to explore doing crazy things in the future, and that, in my mind, only contributes to a better sport, a better community. So for anyone online creating friction where it doesn't need to be, please stop. You're not helping anyone at all, other than maybe keeping your thumbs well exercised behind a phone screen. So
no, don't stop. Do it. Love it.
Yeah.
Do
Well,
it.
obviously, when you start, the more
for my fire.
That's it. But it's very exciting to know it's coming very soon. It's very soon, in fact.
Yeah.
And where is the best place for people to find you and support what is about to kick off and keep up to date?
SeanConway.com, I guess. There'll be a live tracker there and all that sort of thing, and social media. So
fantastic. And people are welcome to join.
It'll be a fun place to check it out. Absolutely. Yeah, well, the swim is a bit difficult because of lifeguarding, but certainly on the bike, and definitely the run. The run's the fun bit, yeah.
I will endeavour to get down that way, as I have easy access to accommodation nearby, and I'm still not really, having spent my last long bike ride doing laps around Snowdonia, I haven't spent too much time on the bike since then, but I will endeavour to come join you for something, whether it's a bike and a run or just a run, because I'll leave the bike in the garage for a little bit longer. We shall see. But thank you very much for that. And all the best for the last month of prep, logistics, practicalities, and stress that goes with it. And look forward to seeing you get all the way to 102.
Lovely, mate. Thanks for having me. It's been awesome.